We have two final presentations to get through this afternoon, and we're very fortunate to have a wonderful double act standing right next to me. We have John White, Technical Solutions Manager, and we have James Glue, also from Aetha. And they are here to talk about 5G drone integration and LiDAR digital twins from UAVs. And over to them.
Good afternoon, everyone. Right, so my name is James Glue. Hopefully the picture matches me. I'm not an imposter today, but so I am head of sales at Aetha, based down on the south coast in Chichester, and I basically have a background in retail. Funny enough, put it up there just for a bit of something different, but 10 years in the fire service. So my background is to find solutions to my clients, customers that interact with us on the website, people I interact with at trade shows, people like you here today. And my job really is to basically find a solution to your problem. So that mostly revolves around UAVs, LiDAR, photogrammetry, 5G connectivity to control your drones in the air, which we'll talk about later, and software. And obviously my colleague here, CTO, which you'll explain in a second, works very closely with myself to be able to work together in a double act to provide that solution. Obviously, it's very important to have that service level agreement post our sales with MOD, DOD, colleges, universities, and just independent businesses. But I think from our point of view, it's very important to speak to you guys here today, because I think some of you may not know what the capabilities of the data are on LiDAR, which we'll go through in a second, but also that the solutions companies are out there and they have got faces, and we're not box shippers, and we want to help you. So that's myself, and I'll pass you over to John.
Cool. Yep, so I'm the second half of this double act. I tend to get quite excited when we talk about things like drones, LiDAR, data capture, and how we actually implement it. So James is here to reel me in, make sure that we stay on topic, stay on track. So I'll say thank you to all of the previous speakers who have made this a very tough act to follow, but we will do our best. So as James said, I'm John, I'm the technical manager for VantageUAV Group. My background is primarily in sort of drones for media, from building drones, manufacturing and integrating. More recently, taking a step into the geospatial world, so how we can use those drones, not just to take pretty pictures, but how we can use those for actual, actionable geospatial data capture, regardless of medium. So I think what we aim to sort of convey here are just how versatile drones for data capture can be, how widespread the applications are, and just stimulate a little bit of thought as to how these can fit into your particular sort of sector of the construction industry. We've got a couple of use cases that we're going to go through in a moment, but again, we're just going to try and stimulate some thought, stimulate some conversations, and I'll hand over to James for a bit of a overview of Aetha.
So Aetha, can you hear me? There we go. Talk to it then. So Aetha, or Aetha, some people call it, but Aetha is part of Vantage. So we're two companies split in half, and how we work is one provides the solutions and one side provides the service, and these two work very closely together to provide a full solution to some of our clients. Not all clients maybe have the infrastructure in place, the systems, the pilots to be able to put a LiDAR and UAV in the air. So what we can do is offer a secondary solution where we do that for them. So some companies want to purchase assets. That might be purchasing, a DJI M300, for example, with a H20T camera attached to it. Some companies go, that's great, and I can see the output, but just do it for me. So we offer both sides of the solution. Obviously, today we're going to talk quite primarily along the hardware, software, and consultancy from Aetha's point of view and the LiDAR. But obviously, from a point of contact from Aetha, we're very focused on basically driving new technology into the market. So we go to a lot of clients, we go to a lot of demonstrations, we've got to go to a lot of seminars and partnership days to basically bring you the latest technology that's available across the globe. Last week we were in France, a partner day, and there we were networking with some very modern, very high-tech VTOLs, hexadrones, quadcopters, which can be very beneficial in the UK, especially as a transition away from the Chinese market. So it's very important right now to be ahead of the game, to understand what's available. From the software point of view, software is probably as important as the hardware, as we all know, as that's what gives you your deliverables at a accurate level. However, software can be quite hard to understand. You may not have the training resources, you may not have the technical knowledge behind that. Again, from us, we understand where you are as a business, understand if you have the infrastructure in place. If not, we can train teams in your industry. We can obviously attend your business. We can obviously do the data for you. We can even do from A to Z for you. It's all about understanding, using the consultancy side of it, and having those teams meetings with you, your CTOs, for example, and also the people that are going to run the departments, to understand what you want to achieve, and then we take those steps backwards to understand what technology you need to put in there. Obviously, we have got restrictions at the moment with some of the things that can be done across the globe. For example, power line inspections because of BV loss, which we obviously can't do right now in the UK in certain areas. However, between now and the next 2 years, that is growing exponentially, and obviously we are probably moving at a faster pace than probably we can keep up with, which is good, because obviously it gives us lots of challenges and lots of conversations. But what we want to make sure is that, as you can see along the top there, we pretty much cover everything from a UAV hardware and software and consultancy side, to be able to rest your mind at ease if you don't know what you're talking about, or you know what you're talking about and you just want a solution.
Cool. So I was going to speak a little bit about obviously why data matters, why data is important in this sector, but after the last talk, I don't think I really need to go into that. I think everyone gets the message. Data is important. It's what underlines all of our critical decision paths. It is ultimately what makes the difference between a project being delivered on time versus being 3 to 5 years overdue, over budget, and out of date by the time it's actually rolled out. I guess what we are going to have a look through is how drones can be implemented with very little sort of time and effort and cost to minimize where traditional methods may add delays. So I guess the first most critical factor that drones can improve in is time. We've seen archaeological surveys hold projects up for upwards of 16 weeks while they're waiting for the right people to become available, for the right equipment to be available, to manage and mitigate the risks of putting physical people on the ground to generate terrain data. And what we find is that with a drone we can cover most of the land that could be captured in, say, 2 to 4 weeks in a single day of operation on site. This means that the data is in the hands of the people who can make those decisions a whole lot quicker, and the actual decision-making process is inevitably cut down based on how quickly we can gather, process, and deliver that data. Obviously, for internal teams, this process is expedited even further. But as a contracted service through Vantage, we found that generally deliverables are within a week or so of the teams being out on the site, that data is immediately actionable by all of the teams. As well as the time saved, we have the detail and accuracy of that data as well. Drone technology in the last 2 to 4 years, as a direct knock-on effect of miniaturization, has become not on a level with, but comparable to terrestrial grade or terrestrial scanning systems. So we're utilizing the same GNSS and RTK systems that you'll find in terrestrial scanning technologies. We're now able to utilize those on unmanned aerial platforms to not just capture, some nice ground data, a nice look at the roads, the features, the walls, but a complete 360-degree view, and combine that data ultimately to fill in that sort of golden thread. So what we're providing with the UAV data capture is that spatial awareness with comparable accuracies to those terrestrial systems that we're used to working with. I touched on it a minute ago briefly, but the risk involved with sending conventional survey teams out on site can be absolutely huge. The risk mitigation procedures involved with sending a team of surveyors armed with GNSS systems on sticks to go and walk over every square meter of the land that you're looking to survey is time-consuming. You can't guarantee the safety 100%. Whereas while we use drones, we don't put boots on the ground anywhere where it's not safe for them. So we can get that idea of the lay of the land before even sending people near that site. So the reason why we're looking at LiDAR specifically as a case study today is for how in-depth, how rich, and how detailed these data sets can be in comparison with conventional techniques like photogrammetry. So with photogrammetry, you'll get a lovely top-down surface view of whatever it is that you're looking at, but as we've seen number of times over and over and over again, this data by itself is not enough. With LiDAR, what we end up with is a comprehensive laser scan of the area where that beam is finding everything under treetops, under forest canopies, in hard-to-find, hard-to-access data where conventional GNSS surveying may not do the job. As I said, we're not positing this as a complete replacement for, but more an augmentation. So the case study that we have in front of us is a mapping of a power line infrastructure section. This whole area was flown at 100 meters above the ground in 8 minutes. So to conventionally RTK survey this whole area in with rooftop data for all of the structures around it, with tree data, things like trunk diameter, canopy measurements, everything intrinsic about those power lines as well. You're looking between at least a 2 to 4 month project. So this small section of power line is sort of like a taster to come of what we're looking to roll out on a national scale, working with infrastructure management companies, the surveying companies, and anyone with a stake in the infrastructure. So conventionally, we have seen the aerial surveys conducted by a plane can be an absolutely deadly cost to to any sort of project. The cost of deployment for a manned aircraft with a laser scanner flying 500 to 1,000 meters can be 10 to 20 times more what you would pay for a full week of LiDAR surveying on site with UAVs. The deployment cost is marginal compared to conventional methods. The point density, because we're flying at a lower altitude, is inherently greater. And with the UAVs, we get repeatability as well. So where we have multiple surveys conducted over time on a site, we again enable that sort of 4D timeline view and snapshot of not just a photo of the area, but a complete 3D representation of that space over time as projects are developing. Cool. I think, let's talk a little bit about the outputs themselves. So we've had a very in-depth, detailed education section on digital twins. So a couple of our terminologies in this, I think we've managed to keep the word digital twin out there exactly. So our static model is directly achievable from the output of these laser scanners. So what Aetha provide the tools to complete and Vantage provide the service to complete is essentially the frameworks for building these static models to then imbue as either a Revit model or a fully built digital twin actioned with live sensors accurately, reliably, and most importantly, repeatedly. For this particular power line use case, we were looking at 2D and 3D vector maps. So taking the laser scans straight into a CAD environment and then turning those into vectorized plans that are quite sort of data efficient. They're very light on how much data is physically used. We're able to make use of that in a 3D space that I'll touch upon shortly. We can manage vegetation and clearance distances. So this is a critical function of the aerial programs for people like the National Grid, National Rail. The aerial programs in place for this are currently utilizing similar technology too, but the optimization comes when you bring in essentially the technologies and the expertise and the know-how that we're looking to essentially push into the sector more. Let's have a look at the AI section, because AI, everyone loves AI. It's a buzzword. But we can do some pretty useful stuff with it. So in this particular use case, the data was taken from those vectorized power lines. Wattage and voltage were simulated to simulate the sag of those power lines under certain loads. A model for wind sway was applied to see how much those cables would move, and then all of the data analysis on the vegetation nearby, any areas of high risk along that site, were generated from that simulated model. Now, this would take months and months of work on a computer manually to do. With AI, it eats it up. It will spit out actionable, usable data in a matter of days for what previously would have taken months. We can automate the generation of reports. And obviously, with that sort of acceleration, we're looking at scaling this out to a national level. So not just small localized flights, but as we'll touch on shortly, there are multiple really interesting projects that we're involved with that will hopefully enable this to be rolled out across the country, maybe even globally.
Yeah, so just to add to the AI side, we work with a few companies that have come to us going, this is what we want to achieve. We don't really have the expertise or the time to understand what the data means, as we all probably have in this room. And obviously a lot of the time is understanding what they want to get as an output and what they want to do as an action from that output. So that could be vegetation, for example. So sometimes actually some of the work is actually more about understanding what you want that data to be turned into as a finalised product, if that makes sense. So at the moment we're talking to a few new companies actually, which is quite interesting, that basically allow us to basically bring that detail on the AI side into a level that allows us to put into a model that you can actually create a PDF report, which obviously allows you then to pass on to your third-party contractors, for example. And obviously John explained about the LiDAR side of it, and obviously having like an 8-minute flight doing a power line inspection. But obviously with the drones that we have available now, you can carry multiple levels of kilogrammage. I think, we have available probably very affordable up to about 11 kilos. So carrying a camera as well as a LiDAR at the same time, conducting a LiDAR survey as well as a photogrammetry survey at the same time means that 8 minutes has actually become more beneficial. So that could be a LiDAR for a measurement down to 1 centimetre, for example, but also then you could be using AI to detect rust damage from a photogrammetry point of view. So it's very important to understand that actually that 8 minutes could be very key. We could be doing hyperspectral, for example, and understanding where, for example, vegetation is around those power lines and where tractor lines are, and that make sure the farmer's actually not encroaching on areas that he shouldn't be, for example. So there's lots of things to consider when we do LiDAR work and how important LiDAR and AI working together is, but also at the same time we can harness other technology and other payloads to that system to basically make the data work better and more efficiently for the client at the end. So.
Yeah, I think multi-sensor applications are absolutely where the industry is headed. So when we're looking at all of these sort of data capturing missions, there's so much that we can see in visible light and in the LiDAR data, but those non-visible spectrums for vegetation analysis, for species analysis, for biodiversity surveys and reports, those are all areas where we're seeing significant developments. So for example, in agriculture, we're seeing application maps for separate automated drones to then go and spray based on where the data has shown it will be most effective. All of these different sort of data capturing systems can feed those, just those critical points of action to where they're needed most. So for example, we've worked quite heavily with Ordnance Survey to develop some digital terrain monitoring and mapping capabilities. We're expanding this out for things like floodplain analysis, for monitoring and environmental impact surveys. It really is a creativity exercise to see what can't you actually do with the UAV platform.
And last one to add on LiDAR, as it just came to my head as it does as we have these conversations, is the next one that we're kind of doing a proof of concept for and getting a lot of information for is, as I say, species, but understanding in forest woodland, using LiDAR to understand what different types of species are in a forest area rather than sending a man or woman out with a clipboard, but also, as you probably can guess, but the LiDAR is very accurate, and because of the amount of echoes that's available with some of the systems in the LiDAR systems that we sell, you can actually penetrate the vegetation so much that you can actually calculate the diameter of the trunk, which gives you an age. So along with a species and an age, that can either give you an understanding of what they want to use as materials to cut down for maybe a college or an agricultural land, but also you can use it for things like carbon and carbon offsetting. So it's very exciting and very big concepts available, and at the moment it's kind of the big driving force of LiDAR at the moment, due to the amount of money that it can save companies from the carbon offset side of it, but also it's a very quick way of understanding what's available in large wooded areas, not just in the UK but outside, in things like jungles, for example, which would normally take people months and months, maybe years to forest and get through by foot. So yeah, it's just very interesting to see how quickly you can do it and how powerful that LiDAR data is compared to just photogrammetry.
Yeah, so touching on, obviously, operations at scale, in the UK, we're currently quite bound by regulations in terms of what we can and can't do. But fortunately, Vantage, the parent group of Aetha, are quite heavily involved in a number of what we call BVLOS projects, so beyond the visual line of sight. So 9 times out of 10, 99 out of 100, your standard sort of drone operator on the street, Joe the surveyor who's picked up a drone to take a look at your roof, will be required by law to always have eyes on that drone, for it to always be under 500 meters away from him in any direction, and to not overfly any sort of uninvolved parties or any sort of risk areas. So we're working to sort of demystify and essentially push the industry forwards with the CAA to enable beyond visual line of sight operations. So this may sound, okay, yeah, cool, we can fly it where we can't see it. Great, what can we do with that? Well, with that, we enable national level infrastructure mapping and modeling to be done within a matter of weeks or maybe months, rather than having to leapfrog teams of surveyors down from sort of site to site managing these short range flights. So one of the ways that we're implementing this is with 5G transmission, control, visualization, and interaction with the aircraft. So we're working with a number of different sort of proof of concepts to essentially utilize 5G connectivity, similar to what we mentioned earlier with Spot the Dog, to not just view what's coming off of that drone, but to control, to plan, to react and respond to anything that's going on in the air. So this means that we can centralize global operations into one central hub, one central stream of data. We can have survey teams split down into just the key people who are making decisions based on that data, looking at it live, informing the data captures as they happen, and making sure that even as that data is captured, an informed decision is being made on how we actually capture and view that data.
Yeah, so I think there's a bit of a difference between remote inspection side of it. So we've had lots of use cases and lots of people using this scenario, basically just to have a third party or a stakeholder have access to the visuals. What obviously the 5G box is attached to, for example, like this M300 here, allows maybe the manufacturer based in Belgium to be able to take control of the gimbal, even the drone, with the pilot still standing at site, and have full control. Because we've got the pilot the spotter on site in the UK, for example, it allows them to have a closer look at something that maybe is more specific for their background, rather than them relying on bringing the data across and getting it right first time. So it allows them to share not just the visuals, but also the access to the gimbal or the payload, and also the actual drone itself, in pretty much real time, milliseconds, which the lag on these systems is very impressive these days, which is a lot of it down to the coding. But it's already proven itself very successful and very popular for that side of it, because obviously it allows people across the globe that normally manufacture so many products, if it's a wind turbine, for example, or a solar park, to have a close look and to inspect something that they notice on the visuals.
Cool. So we were going to end up with a quick Q&A, but I think we've only got 4 minutes left. So yeah, we'll have open for Q&A. Any point, feel free to come and ask any questions for us. What we'll leave you is where next with drones. So Aetha, as we've already mentioned, is fully set up to establish your internal drone teams. If you even have a couple of people on the ground who say are interested in drones, they are absolutely the best people to be putting forward for this. So if you have drone programs already in operation, ultimately we are a point of guidance to develop and steer those in a direction that will essentially not just use drones for the sake of using drones, but will utilize them for the sake of effective, actionable data capture. Stripping back one layer even still, if this is a complete scary new topic for anyone in the room, we do provide the services from the ground up. Absolutely not a drone pun. But yeah, that complete 360 solution to capture, deliver, and help you action that data. I believe with 1 minute to go, that is us.
Yeah, so we've put a few business cards around. It's probably a bit easier than trying to manage to speak to everyone, but obviously connect with us on LinkedIn, obviously an email. But if you want any more information, speak to us as soon as possible, obviously, while it's still fresh in our minds. But we're more than happy to set up calls and even proof of concepts to be able to obviously push these services and systems forward in your business. Thank you very much.